understand that 54% of chronic stress that has detrimental health outcomes to most Americans, like those amazing athletes that I was citing earlier, that 54% actually is a result of financial stress.
Wow.
So,
What?
yeah, it's a lot, right? Like,
All right, this is another episode of the Forum Your Impact podcast. My guest today is Maia Monell from Navit. How are you doing, Maia?
I'm doing great, Michael. Like I said to you earlier, it's a Friday. I'm happy.
We're revealing all our secrets. We're recording on a Friday.
Uh-oh.
All right, so for people that don't know, who is Maia Monell?
Yeah, well, I'm a founder, one of the two co-founders of Navit. We are a personal financial management app that is focused on making financial coaching more accessible. So we're more of a subscription service that adds on banking products in app. So we've got like an automatic savings account, kind of following the neo-bank trend. But our secret sauce is really likening the tool functionality and the user experience more towards fitness apps, nutrition apps. Like, I'm now doing Duolingo, so I'm now using and invoking.
I'm doing Duolingo. We can be Duolingo friends.
Yes, I am shamelessly still trying to learn Spanish, even though I'm a Florida native. And yeah, 30 years later. And so essentially I say that because our focus is, okay, how do we make financial coaching more accessible? Not only do we allow things like kind of the virtual coaching experience, kind of like a new model access to DM a coach, but we're also building out kind of an automatic roadmap and journey. So a user can come in and say, these are my top financial goals for the year. These are some of the barriers that I have to overcome. Tell me what to do, Navit, and we'll automatically create that financial program for them. So it's kind of like hand-holding them through this process rather than just saying, connect all your bank accounts with Plaid and figure it out. So that's what we do. Yeah. And we sell both D2C and B2B through employer channels.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the big problem that you are solving, and what motivated you to start this?
Great question. So I actually come from fitness technology. I was one of the founding members of a company called Bridge Athletics, still down, in existence today down in San Francisco. And we were really focused on how do you create an assistant coach experience for the highest caliber fitness coaches in the world to help train more volume, right? Like train more people in an in-person setting or remotely. And what we started to really identify, we're working with like the coolest athletes of all time, we started to identify that there are a whole host of qualitative metrics that inhibited performance both on and off the field that we weren't necessarily tracking for. So this is pre-Whoop. This is like the beginnings of Apple Watch, where we were starting to say, okay, let's talk about readiness to train. Let's talk about your sleep pattern and score. Let's talk about how you feel today and how stressed you are. That last variable was really important to us because we started to identify that we could actually start to predict and mitigate for injury and those risk patterns based on the stress score of the athlete.
Interesting.
Yeah, super cool. Fast forward to 2019, the beginnings of 2019, my co-founder, Aaron Papworth, had just formulated a plan for creating an app functionality that would coach users towards making better financial behaviors, better financial habits. So Aaron's a behavioral scientist, so she had already kind of like, mapped out the experience for the user because the main problem is financial stress. So we understand that 54% of chronic stress that has detrimental health outcomes to most Americans, like those amazing athletes that I was citing earlier, that 54% actually is a result of financial stress.
Wow.
So,
what?
Yeah, it's a lot, right? Like I say this to people and they're like, no.
Wow, but I guess I'm not surprised, right? Like,
no, of course not. We all experience it.
It's like that other famous hip hop song that says more money, more problems, right? So even if you get all the dough, it's like, well, there's still a lot more to be, more stress.
Yeah, exactly. You still have problems, you still have stress.
That makes sense.
it's the kind of key components to this behavior factor is like, okay, why do we become stressed? We often feel overwhelmed by a scenario that we can't really see like on the other side of. We can't see ourselves clearing the other side. And that's really known as self-efficacy, right? Like, what's our ability to overcome an obstacle? So marrying those two things together, we're saying, okay, we understand how to perceive stress. And I think the consumer, especially out of COVID, like the consumer has never been more primed to identify emotional variables that could inhibit their performance and their success, right? Whether or not that be on the field performance as an athlete or like at work performance, right? So how can we then help them identify it to coach better behaviors to help improve that self-efficacy score and reduce financial stress, making a better banking, better financial consumer more able to overcome obstacles. So there's a bit of kind of financial literacy baked into that narrative. But what we found early on was, a lot of kind of Gen 1, Gen 2 of fintech was focused on financial literacy and utility and like point solutions of utility, right? Like an automated savings account as an example. But what they weren't focused on was actually creating a long-term loyal customer by helping them actually improve their patterns of behavior around their money. And that's what we're doing.
Very cool. All right, what stage is the company at?
So we are post-seed, stalled A.
Stall day.
I like to say stalled A. I hope I'm allowed to say this, that we're recording in 2022. So we've decided to focus on runway, focus on ARR. Launching that Navit work program, that employee benefits program, was really important to our success at the end of this year. So we've kind of done a seed extension round. We've raised over 5 million to date, and we are just kind of sitting happy and focusing on sales. That's
Amazing.
where we are right now. Yeah.
That's probably music to a lot of investors' ears right now, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, you got to be at least break even or profitable. Shocker. But yeah, I guess, for a long time, we've had these blitz scale type models, which make a lot of sense as long as there's abundance of people to invest in it. But sounds like you're batting down the hatches for tough times and in good shape.
I think so. I think we are definitely in good shape, and we're targeting to hit 1 million in ARR in the next couple months, which is huge for a
Amazing.
smaller fintech like us. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could offer other founders only one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
I'm currently reading, I'm almost done with Radical Candor. Have you read it yet?
I have not, but
Okay.
I understand from the title, I probably don't have to read it now because I
You
probably
might not have to read
I've
it now.
already achieved.
I thought that for ages, and so put off reading it, and recently came back from a long overdue holiday, having like this immense sense of dread of almost coming back to kind of like one-on-ones and team interactions. Like I don't know, I had like this pent-up anxiety that I was not a good leader, especially in recessionary times when we're focused on runway, we're focused on burn rate. Like I've never been more aggressive about our budget, maybe ever before, to the team. And so I don't know, I wanted like kind of new tools to combat that. And Radical Candor was really helpful because I think as a founder, especially of an early stage startup, you're so focused on kind of key business metrics, as you should be, you forget how to almost switch off that intensity and bring it into that like collaborative environment that a probably younger startup team member needs, right? Like that kind of community fostering, cultivating, like pushing to a certain degree, but also disassociating negative feedback from personalization, right? Like trying not to make it about you, the human being, and more about like, what's happening right now. So I think I would say, because I'm reading that, the biggest tip I can probably give founders, especially right now in the current macro environment, is to practice Radical Candor and be very aware of the stress you bring into your remote setting or your in-office setting.
That's great advice. What role have partnerships or community played in your success?
Partnerships and community play like every role in our success, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, both Aaron and I are highly extroverted, if you haven't already seen that. And I think that we've done a very good job of cultivating community, especially as we started as a D2C, and that was we still build for the end consumer and we still have that channel open. But it's been very important for us to build a sense of community around not just the tool, but also the mission. So for instance, we do a lot of in-person events. During COVID especially, we did a lot of virtual events focused on, okay, why should we all as a greater community care about financial stress and anxiety and financial behaviors and improvement? Like, what is that doing to the economy at large? We have a great partner who's focused on that correlation to voting pattern and creating a more kind of civically responsible citizen in the country, right? So how can we kind of cultivate a community all around this very maybe seemingly mundane topic of finances and really kind of galvanize people to act around it? That's been totally instrumental. I mean, it's how we're getting to $1 million in ARR. So like, community is everything.
Love it. That is great. And that is part of the theme that we try to touch on, which is why we tell people to form their own pack and use this as the fuel to expand the scalable venture. So that's great to hear that it's working for you guys so well.
Yeah.
All right. I want to be conscious of your time. How do people get in touch with you, Maia?
Thank you for asking. I feel like people can find me everywhere, but going to Navitmoney.com is probably the first step. You can also download Navit from your app store, Nav.it, spelled kind of like to navigate money, to navigate life, navigate it. I'm also super boring, and my handle on Instagram is just my name, so MaiaMonell. And you can find me probably best through those channels.
And I think you mentioned you have a podcast.
We do have a podcast. We're in the midst of reworking said podcast right now, but if you do need financial advice, then you can probably comb it out from the archives, but all of it still lives on the website.
Great. Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're excited to follow you in your journey. We'll make sure that we stay in touch. Final thing is, when we meet interesting people on the podcast, we like to have you introduce us to other interesting people. We usually talk to investors or founders of scalable ventures. So who would you, Maia, like to nominate as a future guest to form your own pack?
Lenore Champagne Bernay is probably one of my favorite people in VC ever. She's my favorite venture partner. I do some really cool stuff with her on the side. She's a huge proponent of community building. So if you're looking for a non-traditional first-time fund manager, her fund is called Bright Ventures. I like literally couldn't be a bigger fangirl of Lenore. She's amazing. Wonderful. Huge fan. Yeah. All
right, Lenore Champagne Bernay, you have the fanciest name of anybody ever nominated. I'm pretty confident that's Fran.
And women supporting women in this business is an important point. So of course I was going to nominate a woman.
I love it. That is terrific. I was more commenting on her wonderful last name or combination of names.
It's terrific. She's a good time.
That's awesome. All right, we look forward to talking to you. Thank you, Maia. I appreciate everything that you've done for us already. So we look forward to talking in the future.
Same. Thanks so much.